Hello again, everyone. It's Cargo Bike Life. It's video 5 in the video series on refurbishing a bicycle to like new condition. We're working on the Trek pre-caliber. I wanted to show you something I found on the bottom of the pre-caliber when I was buffing the frame. Look at that. It says, "I love my bike." It's got a little cat on it. I thought that was pretty neat. It's not a sticker that I put on there. That's something actually underneath the clear coat. And I saw a picture of another Trek pre-caliber on the internet. And that's something that I believe Trek does. They put that on there. Thought that was pretty neat for a kid. What we're going to do now is we've got the frame all cleaned and polished. And now we're going to put the fork back on. Since we got all the parts for the fork done, we're going to start putting the bike back together. So let me lower the camera here. Let me get the right angle on this. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grease the headset. And I use Park Tool PPL 2. It's a Polylube 1000 polyura grease. It's what I've always used on bicycles. I like it. Works well. When I grease bearings, I worked in a bike shop once, and the amount of grease I was putting on there, the guy that was my boss was freaking out. He said I was putting too much grease. I just don't understand how there could be too much grease on metal moving parts. If you look in these bearing cups, okay, there's a little lip that this little bearing sits in. Okay, this little bearing has to sit in there. You see, one side of the cage is flat, okay, and one side you can actually see the ball bearings. So this sits in there like this, so that it spins round and round in there, so that the actual bearings are riding inside this little cup. You can even see a line in here of silver where the bearings have wore the paint off. Okay, that's how they go in. This one goes in like that, and then the bottom one goes upward like that, so that they ride in the cup. And when I grease a bearing, I like to, the first thing I'll do is take some grease and I'll put it on the lip of this cup. I'll wipe some in the bottom one, getting some grease in there. And then I'll put some in the top one. And I have never, after fixing a bicycle, tearing it completely down like this and rebuilding it, have never had a bicycle fail on me. Not once. I mean, you might get, like one time I had a rear brake cable. I forgot to tuck the wire in, and the cable frayed out on the end, and I just replaced the cable. It still worked, but I replaced it because the end of it was all frayed out. If you call that a failure, then I guess I failed. But I put some grease in there, and then I will take the bearing, take this bearing, and I make sure that I get grease inside where I cleaned all that old grease out. I want it packed up nice. I want lots of nice grease in there all the way around that thing. Put grease on the inside of there, packing them bearings in grease. I want them well lubricated. Now, if you want to do it a different way, if you think that I'm using too much grease, then you do it the way you want to do it. But like I said, my bicycles don't fail, and I don't usually have to do, I can ride for a whole year without having to do much maintenance other than general cleaning on my bicycles, because I keep everything nice. And now a lot of bikes now come with sealed bearings, so you won't be doing this anyway. But I like to get on the inside, make sure you get some packed up on the outside. I want that bearing completely packed in grease. And then what I do is I just stick it right in here and push it down lightly. And then I'll take the grease, make sure that it's completely covered with grease. And that looks good to me. It's got a lot of nice grease in there. It's all coated. Be nice and smooth as it rotates. Then I'll do the same for the bottom. Get all that packed in with grease. And then I'll push it in there. Make sure that it's completely covered in grease. There we go. Alright, let me wipe my hands off here. Alright. Then we're going to put the fork back on. Oh, bastard. So we're going to insert the fork back in there. I just put the bottom plastic retainer on there. That keeps the bearings good. Then we're going to slide all of our rings back on the top. What's going on here? Lost one of them there. What's going on? Okay, there's that one. There's that one. And there's that one. Okay, holding up on it. Making sure it doesn't slide out of there. Put our spacers back on there. Oh. Come on, get on there. Don't want grease up on this part. Don't need any grease up there where the stem's going to go to hold the handlebars. Put our spacers back on there. We're going to put our stem on there. And then we got our top cap. And once the top cap's screwed on, you can let it go, it'll stay there. Not a problem. Then we're going to get our, I believe it's a 5mm. Yeah, that's correct. And what we're going to do is we're going to hold up on this and we're going to start tightening this. Move that camera angle. There we go. We're going to tighten that spacer. Not going to crank down on it. Now you see how stiff the fork is? How it's not really spinning that freely, so we need to loosen that a little bit. You want it to turn nice, but you don't want any movement this way. You don't want it to be loose in there. And you got to kind of hold down on the frame and move the fork. You see the frame moving in the stand? What you want to be sure of is there's no play in there. You don't want any play, but you want it to move freely. You want it to spin nice. See how that spins? But no play. Then you're going to line this stem up with the fork, and you'll probably have to readjust it once you install the handlebars and get everything set, tire on there. A lot of times when you try to line it up, it looks straight, and then you'll get everything on there and it won't be, so you just readjust it. Now this, you're going to tighten these. You're going to tighten them both. Try to tighten them equally. And there is torque settings for these. Usually they're like 5 Newton meters, but I don't have a torque. So what I do is I just try to tighten them both equally, and then I'll check when I'm done. And what I don't do is get out here on the wrench on the end and pull way down hard. I keep my fingers kind of close and just I don't want to snap them. I don't want to crank it and ruin the threads and snap them. I just get it nice and tight, and then I'll recheck it once I install the handlebars to make sure it's not going to move anywhere. That seems to be good and tight. And then what I'll do is I'll crank this down, because it's not, now that this is clamped on the head tube, tightening this is not going to make the fork stiff again. But I'll just give it a little turn until it's nice and tight to make sure it's not going to move anywhere. And you can see that our fork is nice and tight in there again. Everything's properly spaced. I got to buff this fork out. I cleaned it, I just haven't buffed it yet. I wanted to get everything put back together. Then we will loosen this. And we will reinstall the handlebar, which has also been cleaned. These bolts, I believe, also have torque settings, and you want to try to tighten them equally so that you don't end up with this one pinched shut and this one way open. You want them kind of equal. That's how I do it. And I'll give them a little twist. I won't tighten them down all the way till I'm completely done. And you got to remember to do that, because I may want to rotate them and I may have to adjust everything. So I just put them on there where they're not going to move. The last thing to put on here is the front brakes. So let me move this this camera down so that you can see it. That should work. Yep. And here again is where you use some grease. Take some grease. You grease this up right here. This little tube where the bolt goes into. Grease that up. You don't have to put a huge amount on there. Just grease them up. And then you got your brake. You got a little pin right there. You see a little pin? That pin goes in that hole, and some bikes will have 3 holes right there. Always start with the middle one. Always. And you got metal in there, and that's why we grease this, because it's metal on metal. Metal on metal requires grease, except for the crank. And we'll get into that in the crank video. Then you just put that in there. Your bolt has some blue on it. Don't scrape that off. That's Loctite. And you're just going to put the bolt in there. Same thing with this one. There's the pin. Make sure the pin goes into that little hole right there. Put the bolt in. Get your 5mm wrench again. And then you're just gonna tighten down on it. Make sure this still moves good. Got good action there. Tighten it down. And they may look a little stiff right now, but I'll show you how to adjust all that later. We got good moving working brakes now. I may back that one off just a hair and see if it helps. May have gotten it on there a little too tight. There we go. They're both moving nice. And we'll work on the adjustment later. But now the front fork is reinstalled and we're ready to move on to other things. But that's all. That's all for this video. That's the reinstalling the fork video. It's pretty simple. You may have a different kind of fork, one with a headset, but like I said, when you take a bike apart, don't be afraid. Just take it apart. Remember what you're doing. Maybe you just take the fork and everything off and you clean it all and put it right back on. Well, it's still fresh in your mind. Maybe you just get a cheap bike to practice on and, you know, do that one, give it away, buy another cheap bike, do that one, you know, give it away till you feel more confident. For all those that are watching the video series, I appreciate it. And y'all ride safe, be careful, and you have a good day. It's Cargo Bike Life signing out.